So it is Thursday, and we've had another update, and in this update, Lareo has been awakened. So another free-to-play commander, which is good. We haven't had one of those for a little while, and his 4-star ability is a direct copy-paste of Merrel's, and his stats are a copy-paste of Uma and Winton's. So his 4-star ability is actually very, very good in my opinion, and I'm just going to go over exactly how good that is and where he'll have a place in players' formations. So I have here my spreadsheet that I made for Merrel when his weapon is released, and I've just added to it down here, because as I said, it is a direct copy-paste. You can see here they're the exact same. The translation seems to be a little off for Lareo's text right now, but you can see it's the same text after each infantry, after each cavalry, and that's 4 attacks to trigger. It's the 5% health increase, and it's a 50% chance to crit. It doesn't show the percentage here in the English translation at the moment, but in other languages right now, I believe, you do see the 120% coefficient. So it's literally the exact same ability as Merrel's. Now, when I made my Merrel video, my conclusion on that was that Merrel is exceptionally good. He suffered a little bit from the fact that he only worked and procced with Cavalry, and that's slightly unsynergistic with Sonara and Rhea, just because of their stats, because of the base attacks you can roll onto their weapons and whatnot. So the only real place you would see it being used would be Inf-Cav formations, and mono formations, particularly because of base attack being so important now, are just so much more prominent. Lareo being infantry, proccing off infantry, buffing infantry, obviously totally nullifies that main weakness of Merrel, and whilst his release, I would imagine, isn't much of a sexy one to a lot of players, because a free-to-play commander being awakened, there's already so many commanders in that bleed synergy. I do actually think he's going to end up a very, very relevant commander, and as I list down here, I really think he enables low to mid-spender bleed to quite a large degree. So since he's a copy-paste of Merrel, all this information that I give up here is accurate for him as well. So something to note is that Merrel does not synergize with Sonara for whatever reason. When you actually read into reports and count how many times he procs and when he procs, all the additional reprocs from Sonara don't seem to actually contribute towards this 4 normal attacks trigger for whatever reason. Admittedly, my Lareo isn't 4-star and I haven't tested this yet, but I assume that is consistent with Lareo 2. If it's not, and he procs off Sonara normals too, he is honestly fairly ridiculous in that case, but I would be shocked if that is the case. If he does proc off Sonara normals, he will undeniably be better than even the likes of Andrea and Patello by quite a huge margin, actually, because his damage output would be ridiculous with the amount of bleeds he'd cause. Because you can see here, Merrel, even with not proccing off Sonara normals, and even having a 50% chance on his crits, he would, over the course of a fight, when you average it out with that 50% chance, crit 15 times, give or take, in either direction, depending on how lucky you get, and through those 15 crits, inflict 15 bleeds, which is the main relevant bit, because that was the bit which made Merrel so awkward, as I list here, in that the bleeds scale off the crit damage, and if you're running Inf-Cav, all your stats will be primarily towards infantry. You might be running Inf and Cav attack and refinement in your badges maybe, and they're a bit more balanced. But even in that case, your weapons will primarily have infantry base attack on them, and you'll probably be going to be running more infantry troops than the cavalry troops too. So even though Merrel was getting a lot of bleeds, in that context, the bleeds weren't hitting that hard. Lareo is totally opposite to that, because you can run just full mono inf and you'll have the full scaling damage of all your infantry, all your base attack going into these bleeds, and he should end up very, very good. You can see comparing to the likes of John, even with 4-star Sonara weapon, you're getting about 40% of the value in terms of bleeds inflicted. They're a little lower value just because the coefficient's lower. But for a free-to-play commander, that is very, very good. And you can see the exact damage increase listed down here. So from the crits alone, you'll get an additional 300% damage coefficient or 3 full damage normal attacks. And then the bleeds will be an additional 1,800 damage coefficient, which is the equivalent of 18 additional normal attacks for a total of 2,100% damage coefficient. For a free-to-play commander, that is exceptionally high. I'm trying to think of what can even compare to that. Something like Crabras for bows, I guess, will compare with it. It will be somewhat comparable to something like Aria with 4-star weapon and 4-star Layla weapon when you start to account for the practicalities of lineups dying and resetting the death markers and stuff like that. So as far as a free-to-play commander goes, this really, really is top tier, actually. It's such a small tweak with it just being Merrel, but the fact he works and scales directly off infantry just fits the synergy so much better. And I think I am definitely going to have to do testing whether he is better than the likes of Andrea or Patello, like I say down here. If I do test that and he does end up performing better, I will probably make a follow-up video going over some report analysis to show exactly how that plays out, because that would be a very, very relevant thing to a lot of players, I think. And yeah, all in all, Lareo as a release, if you are running low to mid spender bleed, this is honestly, in my opinion, one of the better awakenings for a very, very long time. He is very, very good.